Welcome to Faith Works Live. Here's your host, Rebecca Haney.
Life is good, and we are glad you're here. This is Faith Works Live. Rebecca's over here. And today is just a beautiful day to talk about life in general. We've been talking about life in the political, but I'd like to talk about what it means to be pro-life. You know, that's like my favorite topic ever. And original friend of the program, friend of mine, we go way back, but it's been a while since you've been on our airwaves, Bryan Gonzales from InnerVisions, and a ministry that's a passion of ours around here that we say is very much on the front lines of living out what it means to be pro-life, because they help young women in crisis pregnancy to be empowered, to be informed, and to have that inner vision to really see their child in the womb, to understand what it's like, what the development process and all of that. So she really is informed the truth about her body, the truth about abortion, and how she can be empowered to choose life for her child. Bryan, it's great to have you back. Thanks for catching up with us today.
I'm glad to be here. It's been a while, but it's always a joy to be with you, Rebecca.
Yes, blessings on you and your tribe, which I hear is shortly to increase. So we're excited for you
August.
As well.
Yeah.
It's a good time. It's a good time, isn't it?
That's right.
You're being fruitful and multiplying, and we love you for it.
Amen.
But you're also hard at work, and one of the reasons that it's hard to catch up with you is because you're such a busy guy, and you are. I mentioned our audience knows InnerVisions very well, but for someone that maybe is a little bit new around here or could use a refresher, remind us again of what you do in the Des Moines metro area and what your vision is for women in crisis pregnancy.
Yeah, I always like this question because I think what it does is it reminds me that I need to keep it simple, right? And sort of like, we are principally a free medical clinic that helps women who find out when in a time of crisis that they are pregnant and they're unsure of what their decision, either to parent, place their child for adoption, or to have an abortion, or they think that they need an abortion or they want an abortion or whatever. And we try to intercept those folks and get them to come to our doors, and through meeting with our medical professionals, our nursing staff and advocates, share with them some really important pieces of medical information about their life, namely through the ultrasound, and answer some various questions to help them, give them as much information as possible so that when they leave our doors, they can make a most informed decision. And so I think sometimes in the pro-life world, we tend to say like, oh, well, we're saving babies. We're not. That InnerVisions is not really in the mission of doing that. I risk losing donor support and things by saying that, but it's like, no. Our mission is to educate, empower, and encourage pregnant women so that they can make a life-affirming choice, so that they can say, you know what, I can embrace my womanhood and my motherhood, and I can go and make a life-affirming choice, whether that be for parenting or placing your child for adoption.
Yeah. And I think I can see the distinction you're making, and I'd love to expand just a little bit on that. For this reason, I so often hear, and usually it's the more pro-abortion side that are crafting the arguments. And so you get like the grenades lobbed at you on the pro-life side, and you're trying to figure out how to play the defense. So what I'm thinking that I hear all the time is essentially they always pit the welfare of the woman, the rights of the woman, over and above any rights of if they indeed acknowledge that there's a child involved, period. If it's not just her body, her choice. If we finally get to the point where we are acknowledging that there's another human being that is in the mix here, then it's always that the woman's rights matter more over and above a child's rights, to be born, to be alive, to be any of those things. So what I can appreciate about what you were just saying there is that we need to empower women to understand that this is their choice per se, but that this isn't something that someone else can do for you, but you're also strong enough. That you are strong enough to choose life for your child. And I think many times women get beaten down by their fears and these lies. And the pro-abortion side is rife with those lies to say, Absolutely. So you can't, they bring in the fear to say, well, you won't have the dream. You won't be able to finish your education. You won't have a job.
Mhm.
You'll be out on the street. Everybody's going to, laugh at you. You're not going to have, whatever that X factor might be that they really want. They'll say the child is your enemy in those terms. And so you have to choose yourself. And I say women are strong enough to have both their dreams and their child. And I love that you're about empowering and educating women to make those choices for themselves.
Yeah, so let's not pit their career, their dreams, their financial security, their future. Let's not pit that against a baby, right? Because I mean, you've got a few kids, I've got a few kids, and I don't think our wives would say that they're slaves um, to their children. Now, some of us may choose to do that by doing crazy things like homeschooling or whatever. But I think that
That's the new revolution. That's the new
that's right. But
revolution. We're
by
weird in all the best ways.
it's right, yeah. But by pitting those two against each other, that's what they want because they have a vested financial interest. They have an ulterior motive in that. The other side does. Whereas we're trying to say, look, you actually like achieve the perfection of being a mother by birthing a child, or by receiving a child in adoption, right? So like, um, how else is we supposed to perpetuate the world if not through this wonderful thing that um, is a bizarre process, of course,
Yeah.
at labor and delivery. That's sort of this, strange thing that result of the fall and all that fun stuff. Um, but yeah, so I'm not downplaying at all. Like babies aren't important at all by no stretch, any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it was Abby Johnson who, when she was our gala speaker, gosh, now 9 years ago, I think, she was the one who said, "Look, if we want to save the life of the baby, we have to provide for the needs of the mom. What are the needs of the mom that we're trying to provide for? Physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional." And so we as persons, women also, right, are complex beings where we have all these different components and all of these things that contribute to why we make a certain decision to go here or to do this. And so we have to address all of those things to the extent that we can. And we start with the physical. So right at InnerVisions, we're a medical clinic, and so we start with the physical stuff. What's going on with your baby? How far along are you in the pregnancy? Is the pregnancy in the uterus? Making sure it's not an ectopic pregnancy and things like that. And then we can start addressing some of these emotional, spiritual, and mental things as well. And the things that we can't do, we want to be careful that we don't do mission creep. The things that we can't do, we have found extraordinary support resources in the community that we refer out to, because we know that we're just sort of like, I think I've used this analogy before, we're just kind of like the emergency room for unplanned pregnancies, for crisis pregnancies, where we want to sort of cauterize the bleeding and stabilize the bone and then refer them out to the specialist, right? The cardiologist, the orthopedic surgeon, whatever that may be. And so it's really important, like the success of InnerVisions depends on how good our relationships are with ancillary, not ancillary, but ancillary services or supporting organizations in the community.
Yeah, and let's talk about what some of those trends that you're seeing are when women are coming into the clinic at InnerVisions. Is there a certain type, a demographic? I think we often have these pictures in our head about what an someone with an unplanned pregnancy looks like when a woman comes through your doors. What are some of their stories? Are there trends? Are things changing since you've been doing this ministry?
Yeah, so we actually have two kinds of patients that we have in the back of our mind. It's funny that you asked me this because I actually, we work on this every quarter where we sort of make sure that is our marketing aligned with who we're seeing in the clinic, right? Because we get patients day in and day out who come in, and our marketing efforts to target and reach those patients needs to align with what we're seeing. And so we have one patient. Maybe I should just back up, right? Older folks who might be listening probably think of unplanned pregnancies as like teenage pregnancies. Well, last year, our teenage pregnancies, most of our pregnancies are 20 to 29, like 60% of them. And our teenage pregnancies are only 12% of the patients that we see.
Okay.
So we're really not a ton of patients. So we don't typically market to those teenage pregnancies. We're marketing to a 24-year-old and a 29-year-old. Here's the persona of the 24-year-old. She's a single pregnant woman with no kids, likely her first pregnancy. She's probably unemployed, or maybe she has a part-time job. She also might still be a student, unconventional student, where it took her a little bit longer to get through. She might still be friends with the father of the baby, but this pregnancy could be a result of a one-night stand. Her friends and acquaintances are very influential on her decisions, and she wants a quick fix to her problem. People can't hear me, but I have air quotes on problem, so I'm not saying that a baby is a problem.
Right, but that's often the perception, just like we were talking about. That's how Planned Parenthood has marketed this for a
Right.
long time. This is
Exactly.
an issue, just remove the problem, and the only fix that they prescribe is abortion.
Right. And so, so this problem, and the only way she can really get out of that is, although she might be skeptical of the abortion industry, because maybe she's heard things on the radio, there's controversy and things like that. And so she finds a place like InnerVisions because it doesn't have the name of a well-named abortion clinic.
Sure.
And so she's like, well, it's not them, but I'll go to them. And so she might give us a call, and obviously we tell them we don't do abortions, but we're free and confidential. And so that's what gets them. So 24 years old is kind of our one, and she's kind of on the younger end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is a 29-year-old, maybe divorced, pregnant. This is like her third or fourth pregnancy. She may have some other kids at home. She may have already had an abortion or two. And this is what creates this massive tension in her, because she actually knows that the thing inside her is actually a baby, but she also knows that babies are a lot of work. She probably has got a part-time job or a full-time job, and that creates additional challenges for maternity and postpartum. She could be casually dating, so the father of the baby is non-committal, relies more on work colleagues and virtual friends than real friends, and she's too busy with work and home life to even party on the weekends. So I think it's helpful to sort of like, these are our two marketing personas that when we create our digital ads and things like that, this is who we have in the back of our mind as we're moving forward and trying to reach those patients that are most in need of our services.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk a little bit about how you reach out to someone in that second category, someone that has had children, someone that is aware of. So we often talk about the lies that are out there, and that you would think in an information age that everybody understands the human development in the womb, but that's actually not true. There's been a lot of effort, and I would say from the enemy of our souls, that wants to hide and wants to miscategorize our development. The miracle, it's a miracle happening in real time as God knits us together in our mother's womb, and that can only give glory to God, which explains why the enemy hates it. So I think there is a concerted effort to keep that in the dark. But when a woman's been through pregnancy and has received that baby into her arms, she knows very well what's going on. But as you said, there's also a lot of work to raise children, multiple kids, especially if you're trying to do it on your own and work, and that is a big burden to bear. How then do you reach out to someone who, maybe feels desperate, exhausted, they're not sure what's going to happen. Am I going to be able to keep my job in the middle of all this? Relationally, things are in maybe some chaos going on. This is just not the right time. And how do you reach out and meet that woman and meet her needs and encourage and equip her to choose life?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're having these personas in mind, help us craft digital marketing messages that both of these people are going to be finding us on the internet, right? Like 85-90% of the people are doing Google searches or whatever. Some of those people are going to refer their friends, and that's how they hear about us. But a high percentage of people are searching online and finding us. And so keeping that in mind as we're marketing. But when that woman comes into our clinic and sits in front of our advocates and nurses, it's important to validate those fears and those concerns. Like, look, we get what you're saying. We hear you. And we have compassion towards your tension and towards that strife. But through that compassion and through the medical services, sharing information that's going to help them realize that they can do this, right? As they look at their other kids on their, picture of their kids on their cell phone. I mean, that's, if you remember Sarah Herm, she was our gala speaker a few years ago. That's the thing that just sucker punches her and us as we're listening to her story, is that she starts the abortion pill and then goes home to 3 kids, and she could not look at them in the face. And that was just so hard for her, because she knew what she had just done in light of the fact that she has 3 living children. And that's ultimately what led her to do a Google search for what if I don't take the second pill or whatever and find InnerVisions. So that's something we haven't really talked about is APR, the abortion pill reversal, which is another thing we a service that we provide.
Mhm.
And I was just at the Heartbeat International Conference last week, and they announced that there are now over 5,000 successful reversals, which is just incredible.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
so cool. And again, that's over the concerted effort to try and convince women that that's not a real thing.
I know. Yeah.
No, it is a real. There's real
I know.
people, real
I know.
little ones.
I love how they say there's no evidence that it works. It's like, here's a picture, here's a picture, here's a picture, here's a picture.
They have names.
Yeah.
Actually, I could introduce you.
5,000 of them. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so wonderful. And again, that's something that as in the pro-life community, which I assume that the people who are listening to this probably like we're on the same page as far as life goes. But then the question is, how do we continue to uphold and embrace life and create this pro-life culture that we talk a lot about? But I think a big part of that is recognizing the hope in the midst of all of this, that we can't be despairing about the way the darkness that seems to be all around us about this, that if we continue to share through love, the beauty of life, if we continue to say life is, yes, it's hard, but it's worth it. The sacrifices for our children are worth it. And that's really what stepping into your motherhood, stepping into fatherhood is all about. Because we need to speak to guys as well. I think that's another passion of my heart, where it's we have to start looking at the family and rebuilding the family, what that even means, and rediscovering the beautiful design, God's design for strong, healthy families, and that becomes like I said, I mean, I was kind of laughing, but yeah, that is the new revolution in this world. And lo and behold, it's almost like God designed it that way.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you're thinking these big cultural changes and things like that. You're like the doctor who comes in. The guy is obese and he's having a heart attack and in the emergency room, and he's like, you know what, you need to eat more broccoli. Like, yes, I get that broccoli is going to help, but like the patients that come into our clinic,
sure,
I think 10% of them or so, I'd have to go back and look, but it used to be 25. I'd say 10% now have a support person. And half of the time it's the father of the baby. Another half of the time it's parent or a friend or sibling or something like that. So we're not seeing fathers of the baby come into the clinic very often. On the contrary, it's like if there's a male there, we're worried about trafficking or something like that. Like it's not always a good situation. But yeah, no, I would love to get to a world, a culture, a community where we can sort of like, let's have like genuine discussions so that we can not get ourselves into a situation where we have unplanned pregnancies, which might be a nice segue. We didn't talk about it beforehand, but we have relaunched, we had something in hand, but we repackaged it. It's called the Relationships Program. And really, it's one of our nurses that's, we call her nurse educator. And she goes into churches, schools, and youth groups and helps kids understand boundaries, proper boundaries in relationships. And we're not even talking. So what's the major critique of like sex ed education is like, ooh, gross. We don't want to talk about that in school. That's weird. Of course, the kids are doing it at home anyway, but like that's beside the point.
Sure.
But nobody wants to talk about it with adults in a good setting. And so if we try to do that, we don't get much traction. But if we can come alongside and say, look, what does it look like for you and your buddy to have, proper boundaries? Or what about a teacher and a student, or a coach and an athlete? And then once you start talking about relationships in general, then you can get more specific about relationships that are more on the romantic side. And when is it appropriate to do A, B, and C and all that stuff? So we have a sort of a new program. We're piloting it this summer and in the fall. So if any of your listeners would be interested in learning more about our relationships program, Nurse Bryan is the one who's kind of spearheading that. And you can learn more at our website, ivhcare.org/education, or just go to ivhcare.org and click on the education button and learn more about our relationships program.
That is a great idea. In fact, I like it so much, I'm going to link to it. So we'll give an easy link down below this podcast too. So check that out. A wonderful idea. And I think There's so much in what you say, Bryan, because as I'm picturing like the remnant of healthy relationships, there's so many people that I know that that they've been impacted by divorce. They're not even sure if marriage, if a healthy marriage is possible / can exist. They are there's so much. We're living on the wreckage of the last several decades now of unhealthy, fractured relationships. And if we can start, we have to start somewhere, rebuilding the integrity of relationship, rebuilding what love actually looks like, what a family is. And so I know that it's going to be hard, but
baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt. Sorry.
I love it. Bryan brings his own thing.
You just said, what is love?
What is love?
I mean, it was like, how did I not?
Open door, walk in.
Yes.
It was beautiful, beautiful thing. We know what to, Ron, you know what to do. You're listening to Bryan Gonzales from InnerVisions, and like I said, I'll put a link to the new relationships course, and I think that is amazing. That sounds like a wonderful resource. I'll check that out myself, and we'll put that down below. There's also a big annual gala way to celebrate and to support what their ministry is doing. Why don't we take a little break and we'll come back and we'll talk about that and a little bit more about ways that you can support life and what some of the things that we're up against, some of the concerns that maybe Bryan has looking forward to the future, and how you can be a part of the solution. You're listening to FaithWorks Live. Hey, what's for dinner? If you're like me, I hear that 15 times a day. And fortunately, I have a plan. It's typically Anonymous beef at our house. We are such big fans of Anonymous beef at the Haney home because it's just great quality beef. There's no steroids or antibiotics. It's naturally raised butcher beef. They sell by the quarter, the half, or the whole, and they support your local meat lockers so they can help you get it processed in a way that works for you. In this economy, it's good to have affordable options for your meat. And if you're willing to make a good investment in your nutrition for a healthy menu plan, I highly recommend Anonymous Beef. Contact Dave and Mary Lynn at anonymousbeef.com. They welcome your questions. They'll help get you on the schedule. They have locker dates coming up. Don't wait. Secure your locker date today. Go to anonymousbeef.com. That's OHNEMUS beef.com. In today's world, security has never been more vital. And at FaithWorks Live, we're proud to partner with VeriGuard Security. It's a professional physical security service, and they're really raising the bar in security and private investigations. Whether you need a team of professional officers to protect what you have worked hard to build, or their mobile security units for multiple properties or large locations, from business or corporate properties to your home or neighborhood. Perhaps you've got an event coming up. They secure quality security coverage for events large and small because it's about peace of mind and protecting you, your family, your team, and your property. Settle for nothing less than the best when it comes to your security. You shouldn't have to compromise. When it comes to security, you can trust VeriGuard. Contact them today at veriguard.us. That's VARA guard.us. For security service, you can trust VeriGuard. If you've ever wondered what love looks like, check out Agape Pregnancy Resource Center. They offer free services to help women make informed decisions and prepare for their futures. In particular, in a situation of an unplanned pregnancy, women need to know that the truth about their bodies. They need to know the truth about their babies and all of their options. And they'll find that at Agape Pregnancy Resource Center. Go to agapedsm.com and find ways that you can get involved in this amazing ministry, whether it's free pregnancy testing, STD testing, free ultrasounds and counseling, not to mention practical resources, hygiene items, parenting classes, just the list goes on. They change lives. This is a place that truly helps people. And if you care about the women in our community, check out agapedsm.com and click on Get Involved today. When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, every possible emotion goes through her head. Where can she go for help and for hope? She can go to InnerVisions. Here in our metro, we have 2 healthcare clinics where she will find hope and help
From free pregnancy testing and STD testing to free ultrasounds, InnerVisions serves women and men with STDs who find themselves in vulnerable situations. They're completely free of charge because of generous donations from folks like you. And their medical clinics help their patients get all the information that they deserve that empowers them to make life-affirming decisions. That's what they do at InnerVisions Healthcare clinics right here in Des Moines. Learn more at InnerVisions HealthCare.org. That's InnerVisions HealthCare.org. And you can call 24 hours a day at 515-440-CARE. That's 515-440-2273. There's no better time than now to stand for life, and you can stand with Iowa's original pro-life organization, Pulse for Life. They're the longest-standing nonprofit pro-life organization in Iowa, and they're dedicated to informing, educating, and inspiring a new generation to value the sanctity of all human life, from fertilization until natural death. They serve at the State House, they educate in classrooms, at events. They proudly serve on the coalition of pro-life leaders. They are on the front lines of the battle against this throwaway culture of death that we see all around us, and we are winning ground. Hearts and minds are changing, and the pro-life movement is continuing to grow. And you can be a part of the exciting things that are happening right here in our own backyard at pulseforlife.org and get your finger on the pro-life pulse. Sign up for their newsletter, find ways that you can make a difference, and how you can change hearts and minds with their pro-life apologetics course, pulseforlife.org.
And we're back with Bryan. I just said we wouldn't do that. And we're back on FaithWorks Live with Bryan Gonzales. That little off mic moment, that's just for you. It's been too long since we talked with my friend Bryan, and we are just having so much fun learning about ways to support life right here in our own backyard, to empower women, to educate them about what's going on with their bodies, especially in a case of crisis pregnancy where they're concerned. They've got all of these fears, these what ifs, these emotions going on, and they need someone who really cares about them to be able to sit down, give them the truth, give them real information so that they can make informed decisions. And Bryan, we were just talking about kind of the big picture and some case studies, so to speak, of the women that you help, the families that exist today because of the fine work of InnerVisions. And there is a big opportunity for people to support that work. So before we go any further, I'd love for you to just take the spotlight for a couple of minutes and talk about the upcoming gala, always the pro-life event of the season. What, when, who, where, and why?
Yeah. So just as a reminder to your listeners, we're a free clinic. And so we don't take state and federal grant money. We don't charge our patients, and we don't receive insurance. And so really the only way to fund all of the free programs and services that we provide is basically why I exist as a fundraiser for InnerVisions. I work full time for this. And one of the biggest joys of my year is the annual gala. And so that will happen this year a little earlier than normal. So it's May 30th. Usually it's in early June, but we had a conflict with the Iowa Event Center. So May 30, it's still the Thursday after Memorial Day. So it's been that way the last couple of years. We're super excited to have Claire Colwell as a speaker. Have you ever heard of her, Rebecca?
She is great. I absolutely love her.
So she's really grown a lot, I think, in the last couple of years in just telling her story. And it's incredible. I mean, she's like a Melissa Oden, a Claire, Gianna Jessen type.
Mm-hmm. An abortion survivor.
She's an abortion survivor. But I like to say she's an abortion survivor of a successful abortion.
Right.
Because her twin sister in utero was actually successfully aborted tragically. And then, a month after the abortion, her 13-year-old mom starts feeling some, movement in her womb. So she goes back to the doctor, and they said, "Oh, I guess we missed it. But this twin, the surviving twin, is too far along. We can't complete the abortion, or we can't perform a second one." And so 40 years later, or whatever, 35 years later, she's our gala speaker. So she's she was placed for adoption. And part of her story is that her adoptive parents have always told her from very young that she was wanted, chosen, and loved. And I think that laid the groundwork. You talk about, we talked earlier in the previous segment about a culture of people feeling like a pro-life culture, telling your kids that they are wanted, chosen, and loved, no matter where the circumstances that led to them coming into the world, really played a fundamental approach. Because later when she meets her birth mom, and I don't want to give too much away because otherwise nobody will come to the gala. We got to leave some cliffhangers, right? But years later, when she goes and meets her biological mom, and she was so excited to finally meet this woman and say, thank you for placing me for adoption, blah, blah. And then her mom says, I actually tried to abort you. It just crushed her. Initially, it crushed her because she said, I thought my mom and dad always told me that I was wanted, chosen, and loved. And now what I'm hearing is that I was not wanted, I was not chosen, I was unloved. And so, but thankfully that was planted in her at a very young age. And through the Holy Spirit, it grew to a very strong, whatever, bush, shrub, tree, finish the analogy, so that when the tumult of a tornado, we're in tornado season now, came on, she had strong roots and was able to realize, no, God really wants me to be here, and I am wanted, chosen, and loved. So she's going to say it in a much more eloquent way with better analogies than I can. So that's May 30. For more information about the gala, ivhcare.org/2024 gala, or just go to the website ivhcare.org. Should be a pop-up. You can click on it to register. We're super excited to we'll probably have about 1,200 people again this year. So that's exciting.
Awesome. And they're always smarter than average and very good looking. So if you want to be a part of that crowd,
the people.
Yes, the attendees that are there, right?
That's
so
right.
they are the cool kids that show up.
Yeah.
And sometimes you let a few of us rabble rousers in there too, Bryan. I'm very excited. I didn't realize Claire was your speaker. So it's been quite a while, several years since I've talked to her, and I think that would be really just awesome to have her back. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Quite a story. And again, in a world that tells us that tries its best to dehumanize what's happening in a pregnancy, specifically so that you can destroy, you can, eradicate the child involved in the pregnancy. And there's something so sinister about that to say, it's really not human. It's just a clump of cells. It's just, it's a future potential human. Maybe it's whatever you want it to be. It depends entirely on a whim, on, what you're feeling that day. We're not going to show you what's really going on. We're not going to show you pictures. We're not going to show you the ultrasound. Right? It's just cardiac activity. It's not really a heart. It's a budding person with a heartbeat, with a specific genetic code, with his or her own developing body, with his or her own fingerprints, just all of these things that develop within God's work in the womb. And once you understand that and you see somebody that says, no, that was me, that it becomes impossible to ignore. It becomes really impossible to justify. And her story is going to be incredibly powerful, I'm sure. And I know that there will be young women and probably quite a few babies there that are clients of InnerVisions, and you'll be able to look around and see the fruit of your amazing ministry as well. That's always my great joy. We didn't get to go last year, but my husband and I, that's our anniversaries around that time. And so that's always like our unofficial date is to go and see and count the strollers and count the babies that are there. It gives me such great joy.
I've wanted to do this. Now, how's this and this might rub some of your anti-gambling listeners the wrong way, but I thought it'd be really fun at the back to have a baby race, like a toddler race, line them all up one and one. Yes. How they do they do animals, right? Not what are those slow, turtles or something like that. And then we could have people betting on which baby's going to win and and the 6-month-old in lane number 5 coming down the home stretch.
I would watch that. I would.
Not that you bet money on.
I'm not a betting man.
Okay.
But I would.
It's a fundraiser, so we're trying to convert this into funds to help our ministry. So.
Well, I'm independent Christian, so we bet marshmallows.
That's right. Hey, we'll bet Bitcoin if you want to do cyber currency. We can do that.
Word, man. With that. That's going up every day. That's
That's
something.
right.
That's a bandwagon I missed. But hey,
There you
if
go.
you were
I know.
in on the bottom floor of Bitcoin, hit us up. Check out
That's
InnerVisions.
right. That's right.
We'll take a Bitcoin too.
We'll take a Bitcoin. Yeah. You just drop it in the hat. Drop your Bitcoin in the hats. In our cyber hat.
I'm not even cool enough to know how you do that. I know that Amazon will convert them, but that's about all that I
good.
know.
Yeah.
If I had one, then I would experiment and I would let you know.
Yeah.
But
in all seriousness, we do actually accept Bitcoin, just so you know.
Do you really?
We have
For
a
real?
wallet. Yeah, we have a wallet, and if people want to donate cyber currency to
That's awesome. Here I was thinking that you were just making a little, cyber joke, but nope. You're on it. See, these
That's
guys are so cool. InnerVisions, check them out, guys. Very worthy cause to support, which is why, Bryan, I think getting your perspective on the overall landscape in Iowa. I know I have a lot of conversations about people that are involved in, more of the political side of things, some of that, cultural milieu, as it were, and get into a lot of internet debates over these topics. Sometimes I get a call from CNN. You never know what's going to happen. But the discussions that I hear tend to be, more or less back and forth. I'm not sure. It's hard to tell sometimes if you're gaining ground. And legislatively, I was pretty disappointed. I'll just put it out there that it didn't seem like there were any real ground gaining moves. Like, it seems like there were some opportunities that were wasted, just to be frank. But you guys get to see real lives impacted and transformed. And I would love to hear what you see as far as the landscape, where we are making some progress, maybe some areas that we can change. What do you think are some pitfalls that we're falling into as pro-lifers? And how can we, how can we pivot? How can we rearrange things? Maybe where some areas that you think we should focus?
So I'll try to remember two things. So if I forget, you can put me back on, and hopefully
Sure.
I remember what they are. So the first one is going to be in February, we saw a trend of non-Hispanic non-English Hispanic only speakers. And
Okay.
we had a pretty good idea of where these patients were coming from and why they ended up in Iowa. Of course, we can't, we were only speculating because they're not telling us, but when we're asking for IDs and they're showing us Guatemala and Nicaragua and those sorts of things,
Sure.
they're probably here in ways that are non-conforming to our legal systems. And so, but that's when you have open borders, right? There's a political implication here, right? Policy of open borders necessarily means that we're going to have women who are forced to come here against their own will.
Yeah.
And their only form of currency to pass from South America to Central America to Mexico, et cetera, is their body. And then 6 weeks later, when they're getting to Iowa, guess what? They're going to have an unplanned pregnancy. And so
Wow.
that was a tough month. We saw lots of patients, and we don't have a Spanish speaking nurse. We have to hire translators to come in. For translators to come in person, it's complex because you got to schedule that and everything, and then patient shows up late because they didn't understand the time, et cetera. But the ones that are over the phone are even more expensive. So if we got a walk-in patient or something like that. So, I think from a political standpoint, when you have open borders, you're necessarily going to have this effect. Now, I don't think people think about this when they have that, right? And so that's okay. It is what it is. No judgment necessarily one way or another. When they get here, though, now we've got to do something with them, right? I mean, we've got pregnant patients that don't speak English, and some of the resources, some of the community resource organizations that we were referring them to they don't see undocumented patients or clients.
Oh, I see.
So then it became this difficult thing where we're sort of taking care of these patients, referring them on to other organizations, but then they're sending them back saying, "Sorry, we can't do anything with them." So there was a real strain on kind of a bottleneck for us, and so politics ends up having a real effect, sort of boots on the ground here in Iowa. The second thing I was going to bring up was the looming decision from the Iowa Supreme Court, on whether or not the heartbeat bill is constitutional or not. And I think what's helpful maybe for your listeners is to kind of get our position in general is go ahead and try to pass this. I mean, we're not a lobbying organization. We're not active in politics or legal aspects. There are occasionally our executive director, Teresa, has been invited to testify sort of as expert testimony. for medical stuff, right? And so she's been able to help help legislators make informed decisions. And we want our patients to have informed decisions. And so we'll help our legislators make informed decisions. And so our general position is you guys go out and try to get the best pro-life legislation possible, and we'll adjust on our end. Well, some people, some donors in particular, have said, well, we're not going to need InnerVisions if we have the heartbeat bill. And I just want to caution people that, first of all, the heartbeat bill is not a 6-week abortion ban. It might be more like an 8 to 10 week abortion ban. And you say, well, how can it be 8 to 10 weeks? Well, because the heartbeat bill says that an ultrasound, an abdominal ultrasound, has to be performed by a physician on a woman who wants to have an abortion. And if no fetal heartbeat activity is detected, then you can have the abortion. Well, based on adipose tissue and all this other stuff, there's kind of a range on when an abdominal ultrasound is going to show fetal heartbeat. And so what we wanted to do was figure out, okay, in 2023, what percentage of our patients came to us before 8 weeks? 73% of our pregnant patients came to us before 8 weeks.
Wow.
So that alone, I think, demonstrates the necessity of InnerVisions sticking around and being available for our patients who are come to us at a really critical time in their pregnancy, getting really important, valuable information before they might go to the abortion clinics and things like that. The other two things to keep in mind is, one, you can simply, with your cell phone, order abortion pills from India and Canada and get them mailed to your door. And so we stand in between that, sort of helping educate these patients. Before you decide about getting a chemical abortion, you should know A, B, and C. And if they do end up taking the pills, here's where to come to reverse that if you want. And a thing called abortion tourism, which I guess chemical abortion is kind of, the pills, you can get them online. It's kind of a form of abortion tourism. But our neighbors to the north, Minnesota, and to the east, Illinois, have late-term abortion laws that people in Iowa, even if we get a heartbeat bill, are going to need services like us before they end up going north and east. And so for all those reasons, I think InnerVisions is going to be sticking around for a little bit longer until the pro-life legislation can get farther and farther advanced. And even then, I mean, if we got to the point where, we had a complete abortion ban, I mean, there are states like Texas and Alabama and Tennessee that have abortion bans or near abortion bans, and they still have clinics and centers that are serving women because they need it now more than ever because they don't have a place to go to. So where are these people in crisis going to go if not to those places?
Right. And I think I would say it absolutely highlights the need for more support for women in crisis because there's going to be a lot more of them. There are going to be a lot. I'll just say, as I'm seeing like pro-abortion politicians literally campaigning at Planned Parenthood clinics, they're literally running ads now that talk about how, women are going to have to run across the state lines because, we'll be the abortion sanctuary. This is what they're saying themselves. And I mean, politics is another show and I understand that, but it does impact our reality. And the argument has never been if we pass a law, abortion's going to go away, because we understand the reality of what fears and lies do to the human heart. We also understand the need that is real and is there. And what we're asking is for the law to, at least what I'm asking, is for the law to recognize the humanity of the preborn child and that they have the same rights under the law as anybody else. And that then we deal with, okay, how do we deal with the situation? How do we deal with somebody who is vulnerable, who is a victim, who is any of these things? You mentioned trafficking victims and the fact that abortion has been, a long-standing tool of abusers, of people who want to hide the evil that they're doing to vulnerable young girls, to vulnerable women. And that's a horrible travesty against humanity, but against the most vulnerable. And the pro-abortionists know this, by the way, and they don't really see fit to report most of those as crimes because it cuts into the bottom line, don't you know? But we absolutely need to have pregnancy clinics that are there to support women, to support the babies, the families that will result from it, far from the legislative side. That we just need that declaration of truth and justice, as far as I'm concerned. And then we figure out, okay, how do we live that out? How do we help one another in the midst of all that? So I'll step down from my soapbox now, resume my natural height, all 5'3".
And just to make sure that I'm advocating for as much abortion restriction as we can possibly, even if that means I'm out of a job. It's always strange when I go meet with donors and I sit in front of them and they say, how are things going? I'm like, you guys, you realize it's bittersweet that we have to exist.
Sure.
Like, it would be wonderful if we lived in a world where InnerVisions doesn't have to exist. However, abortion is a reality. And I think so, even again, like I said earlier, even if we pass laws where abortion is not legal anymore, I still think there might be a reason to have a place like InnerVisions, because you can go elsewhere. I mean, the overturning of Roe versus Wade was great, but now it created 50 fronts rather than just one front. I think it was an important first step in order for 50 battles to go on at the state by state level. But nevertheless, it's still going to be really key and critical. And so it'll be really interesting to see how the judges rule in June. Do you have any insider information on that? Like, you talked to these people.
I'm not an insider. I will say I will get an update as we're recording this. I have an update scheduled tomorrow from one of the lawyers that's actually arguing the case. So stay tuned for that. And I will pass on everything that I hear, and hopefully I can get him in his own words, because he'll have lawyer speak, and it'll be far more official than mine.
That's right. You should tell him, we're not recording, but then hit the no, right. Don't do that. So,
well, we are a one-party state here in Iowa. I know that. So as long as one person knows that we're being recorded, it's technically legal. Okay. Fun fact. I also know the word. I know the word allegedly. Allegedly. That's protection. Allegedly, and I know the Fifth Amendment. So there's that. That's the extent of my legal acumen. There you go. But I know enough, just barely enough, to get me in trouble. So we'll stay on the other side of that for this conversation, Bryan, because you're a fine, upstanding guy.
I appreciate it.
Well, and I don't want to. Now we're smiling and laughing, and so the question that came to my mind was a little bit more serious. But you mentioned that there's all these people's different stories. They're coming from different backgrounds, and the potential for abuse is very real. And so I just wondered if you have seen, and whatever you can tell us about people who might be victims of trafficking or human trafficking, or maybe just tell us an example of how something like that would go and what the process is. Because I hear a lot about this on the border security front as well. There's many dangers that result from having an open border. And if your argument is compassion, it's not compassion to create an entire class of victims, people that are being manipulated and abused by gangs, cartels, everyone who is like interested in the absolute worst, who profits off the worst in humanity. Those are the people that are now running folks back and forth, desperate folks across the border. And it's not a good situation at all, not to mention drugs and whatever that might be. But if that were a situation in the clinic, how would you guys be able to handle that? What would be some of the steps that you would use?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish like one of our nurses could come and join me for this part, because they know the steps and things like that. I do know this. A phone call to local authorities and a phone call to the National Sex Trafficking Hotline is included in that. But the challenge becomes if there's an allegation, right? If we suspect there to be something, they would be busy day in and day out chasing suspicions and allegations. So it really has to be from the patient themselves, who wants to get out of their situation in order for them to really intervene and make a difference. And they're not going to want to do that. These patients don't want to do that for two reasons. One is if they're here without the proper documentation, they could be deported, or if word gets out, then retaliation to family that's back home. So it becomes just such a difficult situation. And then keep in mind they've been brought here, or they come here, but they don't necessarily have family or friends or a community or anything. So then their trafficking, in a sense, continues, because in order to have a roof over their head or food on, at a meal, they have to do certain things in order to do that. So it's a very complex, challenging situation that is multifaceted and not very easy to fix. And then, of course, if they want to, maybe they came here illegally, but they wanted to become legal when they get here, that process is crazy and difficult and hard. And so it's just a really crummy situation all around that is really hard to it's hard to diagnose the problem in order to ascribe a solution. And so, I think that's, we've never really prayed as much as we have as a clinic in the past couple of months because of these really tough situations.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Well, then help us inform our prayers a little bit, Bryan. What are some of the best ways that we can pray? Obviously, Coin of the Realm is acceptable, and we've got our fundraiser coming up again. I'll
Sure.
link to that down below too, so that you can get your tickets now. You'll hear an amazing testimony from Claire Caldwell, and just meet all these awesome people that also care about life. Get to meet some of the moms and babies that your support helps to encourage and to empower. But what are some other ways that we can help specifically both pray and support InnerVisions?
Yeah, I mean, if pray for a Spanish speaking nurse who would want to join our ministry. I mean, we have an ad out there. We even advertised in Spanish on the Spanish radio stations here in town, and haven't gotten much traction. And so, it would be nice if somebody who looked like our patients would want to come work for us rather than me. Well, I'm not a man. I'm a man, not a woman. But rather than a white person. But because I think that's important that when they come in, they feel like this person really understands them from a cultural, linguistic, et cetera standpoint. And so we would love for somebody like that. So pray for God's provision to bring a Spanish speaking nurse, a female who's an RN, all that stuff to our clinic, and then just generally, continue to pray that our nursing staff, we've hired a few nurses recently, and so pray that their training continues so that we can start opening up the schedule, because our schedule basically, so like by Monday of every week, the entire week is booked.
Wow.
And so if we've gotten more nurses hired, and so as they get trained, we're going to be able to open up the schedule a little bit more, and so then hopefully more and more patients will be led to us. But maybe the other thing to pray for is for our patients to show up. While we have our entire week is booked at a time, they don't always show up. And so that becomes really sort of this, our schedules are constantly like, sending text reminders out. And then when somebody says, oh, I can't make it, then they got a waiting list, and we pull somebody over here and is it robbing from Peter to pay Paul type of thing? But because lives are literally hanging in the balance if we don't get them through our doors. And so, pray for our patients to show up, and pray for our nurses to continue to get to feel the confidence that they can start seeing patients on their own.
Yeah, that's great. I will add it to our list, because we do intentionally pray for InnerVisions and the ministry. You guys have been doing great work. And we say you're on the front line. That's not really a metaphor, because you're there when people are walking through the door at points of desperation, coming from all different kinds of backgrounds. Maybe they don't really know anybody else in town, and they come to you for help. And just, you see all types of people in every situation, but they know that they have a need. And it reminds me of when Jesus talks about blessed are the poor in spirit. And that's what I believe that means, that we know our need, and we're reaching out, we're hungry for something. Maybe we don't even know what the answers to those needs are, but we know that we need something and somebody. And that's when you're there, and the fine folks, the staff, the nurses at InnerVisions are there to help meet that need, and save lives in the process as well, to help empower those women to show that they can do this, and that they're not alone. And I think that's oftentimes what we need the most. So thank you once again from the bottom of our hearts. Anything else before we sign off for this episode, my friend?
Yeah, no, I thanks for your time. This is always great to join you, and look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks at the gala.
Yay, it'll be so much fun. And again, that stroller race idea, or the toddler race, I think that'd be hilarious.
That'd be fun.
I like it. Let's see if we can make that happen.
All right.
Bryan Gonzales from InnerVisions. Check out the links down below. I'll link to the information for the gala, and also for that relationship course. And if you caught us in the middle, well, check out the podcast, and you'll catch up real fast to everything we were talking about. And this is a wonderful way to support life right here in our own backyard. Like we often talk high level legislatively, what it means to be pro-life. This is it, folks. This is what it means to be pro-life, is to support the doctors, the nurses, the counselors, the staff that are there to meet the needs of women in crisis pregnancy. And that is how we change the world for life. I would say 2 lives at a time. How about that?
Yeah.
You've been listening to FaithWorks Live, and it's our joy to have you with us. Pass this on to a friend, someone that's passionate about life. And if they want to join in the work, welcome one and all. We'd love to hear your feedback. Saints and scoffers alike. We'll take it all. Wherever you get your podcast, pass it on. Until then, we have a mission to love God, to serve people, and to live free.